I use Post-it notes for reminders. I write little notes about things I need to do or people I need to get a hold of, and then I hang them up in all sorts of strategic locations. I put them on my computer screen. I put them on top of my desk. Sometimes I hang them on my bathroom mirror so they're the first thing I see when I get up in the morning. It's a way to remember, to make sure I won't forget what I need to do. We forget. We are absent-minded. We need to write notes to ourselves to make sure we remember. So when God comes along and he makes a promise and says that he will never forget it, on the one hand, that sounds great because we don't want him to forget. But on the other hand, we have to wonder if I forget things and if he forgets things and if she forgets things, then how can we be sure that God will never forget? How can we, who forget so much, possibly understand a God who never forgets anything? We don't want him to forget, but how do we know he won't? And so this is what God does for us. He comes to us and he does a very human thing to help us see who he is. He writes himself a note. He puts his rainbow in the sky and he tells us that whenever he looks at it, he will remember. It's not like he could forget, but just so we can be sure, he creates himself a reminder. And so God says, I promise I will never again destroy the world by water. And we say, well, that's great, but what if you forget? And God says, I will not forget. See, I've written myself a reminder. Just as sure as you see the rainbow in the sky, you can be sure that I will see it too. I will not forget. And if the primary burden of this passage is that God will never again destroy the world with water, then the primary lesson is that he will never, ever forget his promises. Probably of more immediate concern to us than the possibility of experiencing a worldwide catastrophic flood is the assurance this passage gives us that God will never, ever forget. He won't forget. He can't. He's written himself a reminder. And the thing is, this is not the only time in Scripture that God does this. For example, in the story of the Exodus, when Moses leads the children of God out of Egypt, there's this very curious instruction of God for the night of the Passover. Before the angel of the Lord passes through the land, the Israelites are told to slaughter a lamb and then splash the blood over the sides and top of their door frames. And then when the angel of the Lord passes by, God says he will see the blood on the top and the sides of the door frame, and he will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter into the houses of Israel. And I say this is a curious instruction because God did not need help identifying which houses the Israelites lived in. He already knew which ones were Israelite houses and which ones were Egyptian houses. So why does he need the blood? Why does he need this sign? And the answer, again, is that God is writing himself a reminder to serve as a sort of guarantee that he will not forget. The Israelites might have asked Moses, well, what if God forgets where we live? What if God sends the destroyer into our homes? And the answer would have been, he will not forget. See, the blood serves as a reminder. And just as sure as you see the blood over your doors, you can be sure that God will see it too. He will not forget. So the blood of the Passover lamb is a post-it note for God. Or again, consider this passage, Isaiah 49, 15 and 16. It says, can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion for the child she has born? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I've engraved you on the palms of my hands. See, I've engraved you on the palms of my hands. Can there be any doubt but this is a prophecy of Jesus Christ? Some 700 years before Jesus, Isaiah is talking about the palms of God's hands. And we know what he's talking about. We know what this is a reference to. These are the hands of Jesus that took the nails on the cross. These are the hands that were shown to Thomas after the resurrection to prove that this person standing in front of him really was the Lord brought back to life. These scars are still seen on Jesus even as he lives in heaven today. And they are reminders to God. This is so cool. This is so powerful. I can't help but get excited about this. Do you see what God is saying? He says through Isaiah, a mother might forget her child, a father might walk out on his family, but I will never forget you. I'll never walk out on you. And we say, God, that's great, but what if you forget? And then he points at his hands and he says, I will not forget. I've written myself a reminder. I've engraved you upon my hands. I will not forget.